أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Let's all turn with our hearts into the direction of Karbala and send our salams and salutations to Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, even though we're very far from him, but the salam is delivered to the Imam. أشهد أنك تسمع كلامي وترى مقامي. I bear witness that you see me in my current position, and that when I say salam, you respond to that salam. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. Raise your voices. السلام على الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين ورحمة الله وبركاته. For the hastening of the reappearance of the Master, the Savior, the Avenger of the sacred blood of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, Al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan al-Mahdi, recite aloud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is the eve of Ashura, a time when the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt would be at the very peak of their grief and their mourning. Imam al-Ridha alayhi salam says that my father, meaning Imam Musa ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim, he would begin his grief on the 1st of Muharram, in the famous narration where Imam al-Ridha speaks to Ar-Rayyan ibn Shabib, who was a companion of the Imam. He said to him that my father's grief would begin on the 1st of Muharram, and the grief would be compounded and would increase day after day until it was the day of Ashura. وَكَانَ ذَلِكَ يَوْمُ كَآبَتِهِ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ. That would be the day of the ultimate grief, the day of mourning, the day of extreme sadness, and he would never be seen laughing or even smiling on such a day. The night, the eve of Ashura, is also a time when Karbala was in a tumultuous situation. Those who had gathered and split into two camps, the camp of Umar ibn Sa'd, may God's curses be upon him, was enjoying itself. They were having parties, they were having fun, they were laughing and dancing and singing. They were rejoicing at the fact that their numbers were too huge, too massive for the camp of Imam al-Hussein to stand a chance. Their numbers were so big, brothers and sisters. Some have said that the army of Yazid would stretch as far as the eye could see. Allahu Akbar. The army of Yazid was so big that some have said there were still people in Kufa connecting the army of Yazid in Karbala all the way to Kufa. That's about 70 miles, brothers and sisters. Some have suggested that the number of people who had come to Karbala were close to 1 million. The 30,000 figure that you've heard, those who have tried to reconcile between these reports, they say that the 30,000 were conscripts. That was the official army, which was supposed to go and fight a foreign enemy, but was diverted towards Karbala. These were the ones who were trained soldiers and killers and mercenaries. 30,000 of them that Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam mentions. يَزْدَلِفُ إِلَيْكَ ثَلَاثُونَ أَلْفًا يَتَقَرَّبُونَ إِلَى اللَّهِ بِدَمِكَ. So 30,000 were the armed soldiers, were the trained mercenaries, and everybody else were the commoners. They were the normal people, if you like, who would come from Kufa. Traditions say that Kufa was emptied of all able-bodied men. An entire city was emptied. Everyone was sent to fight Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. One report says that while everybody was being sent off to Karbala, because the order came from Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad ibn Marjana, may Allah curse him, that everyone should go. No one stays in the city. And so, as the last groups were sent out towards Karbala, there was a stranger from out of town. This guy came and accidentally stepped into the city of Kufa, which had been cordoned off by that point. When he came, he was caught by a man, one of the generals of the army of Umar ibn Sa'd, by the name of Hussein. He was caught because Hussein was the leader of the police forces, if you like, the security forces. So when he saw this man, he said to him, "Why aren't you in Karbala?" He said, "What are you talking about? I have no idea what you're referring to." He said, "But the order was made that everyone should go to Karbala." He said, "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm from out of town." So they arrested him. They said, "We're going to have Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad decide what he's going to do with you." So they took this man to Ubaidullah. Ubaidullah said to him, "Why aren't you on your way to Karbala?" He said, "I'm from out of town. I have no idea what you're talking about." So he said, أَظُنُّكَ صَادِقٌ. I think you may be telling the truth. وَلَكِنْ اضْرِبُوا عُنُقَهُ. But kill him so that he becomes an example for other people, so that no one stays in Kufa. The point here, brothers and sisters, is that you had 30,000 trained killers and soldiers. Then you had on top of that the entire population of adult able-bodied men from Kufa, all of them descending onto the valley of Karbala in order to murder Imam al-Hussein. That's one camp. And their qualities, their characteristics, their traits are obvious to all of us. So brothers and sisters, let's not follow in their footsteps. Let's not do the sorts of things that they used to do. Let's see what Imam al-Hussein did on the eve of Ashura and follow that example, where Imam al-Hussein spent the night in prayer and in worship and in showing acts of kindness and generosity to his family, to his children, to his friends. And the other camp was that of Hussein. They spent the entire night. Some say that the sound that was coming from the camp of Umar ibn Sa'd was music and dancing and laughter. And yet the sound that was coming from the camp of Imam al-Hussein was like a beehive, because they were all engaged in supplication and worship and prayer. And yet again, you see the stark contrast. So these were people who stayed back, supported Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Imam al-Hussein filtered them out. Imam al-Hussein tested them, sieved them, ensured that only the best of the best would stay. Only the legendary ones would remain back and offer their support and wouldn't run off as many people prior to them did. Many people who joined Imam al-Hussein saying that we're going to help you, support you, but then realized that this is not going to be an easy journey. It's going to be arduous, it's going to be deadly, and decided to turn around and abandon the grandson of Rasulullah. The ones who stayed back with Imam al-Hussein were the best of the best. Imam al-Hussein ensured that they were. On the eve of Ashura, Lady Zainab came to Abu Abdullah. She said to him, "Akhi ya Abu Abdullah, have you tried and tested your companions? Are you sure they're going to stand with you?" Because some say that on some of the nights, especially when news of the murder of Muslim ibn Aqil arrived to Imam al-Hussein, and the camp realized for the first time that the tables had turned, Muslim had been killed. Imam Hussein's own ambassador had been murdered and beheaded and thrown from the top of the rooftop of the palace. Some say 6,000 people were with Imam al-Hussein but abandoned him. When we figured out that it's one thing to say, I'm going to abide by my religious obligations, I'm going to be a moral person, I'm going to do the right thing, I'm going to be a righteous human being. It's one thing to say it. It's a completely different thing to actually put your foot down and do the right thing when you're at a fork and you have multiple options. These are lessons, brothers and sisters, that you're going to face day in and day out. That's why I said early on in the lecture series that one of the best and greatest and most accurate moral compasses that you could have and you could impart to your children and your family members is to always ask yourself, what would Imam al-Hussein do? Because he gave us so many examples that were so clear that this moral compass is now incredibly accurate and insightful and provides the guidance that we need when we are faced with these circumstances and these situations. So, Imam al-Hussein, I want to dedicate this very special, very important night where we have maximum attendance and we have maximum attention and we have maximum emotions for Imam al-Hussein, to one of the slogans of the Imam that you've all heard over and over again. Imam al-Hussein repeated this statement multiple times on the day of Ashura. ألا هل من ناصر ينصرنا لوجه الله. Is there no one to help us for the sake of God? This statement, brothers and sisters, let me mention something before I try and cover it and seek inspiration and lessons from it. One of those days when the armies were in a state of standoff but truce, the war had not begun, there were two people in the camp of Yazid who defected and approached the camp of Imam al-Hussein. They left that camp. They had come all the way from Kufa, but they decided to leave the camp. This is before Hurr. Hurr also defected, but he did so on the day of Ashura. These people did so a few days prior to that. When they defected, they came towards Imam al-Hussein. They told the Imam, Ya ibn Rasulullah, as we were in this standoff, our army and yours, we were reminded of a day when we were with your father Amir al-Mu'mineen. We were heading back from the battle of Siffin when the Imam suddenly took a bit of a detour, and then we noticed that he went to a private place in the desert, he prayed, and then he called out, Sabran ya Aba Abdullah, be patient my son, O Aba Abdullah. So we said to him, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, what is this about? The Imam said that one day on this land there is going to be a battle between my son and his small band of supporters and family members and an army of vicious, vile, grotesque animals. So when we heard you, when we saw you, we had flashbacks of that incident. So that's why we've defected now. The Imam said, so you're going to join me? They said, Ya Aba Abdullah, not quite. Even though we don't want to participate in your massacre, but we can't quite get ourselves to switch over to your side because we know what's going to happen. We know this is certain death. As I said, the camp of Yazid had tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of people. If they wanted to, and if the circumstances were normal circumstances, they could come and simply trample over the camp of Imam al-Hussein and completely obliterate it within a matter of a few minutes. It's like a black hole devouring an entire solar system. It could completely eviscerate it. And yet, subhanallah, look at the caliber of the Shia of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Yet it took them, that monstrous military force, the better part of half a day. How? You'd think that they could just simply kill everyone within a matter of minutes, right? Because they were outnumbered by a factor of 1 to 100 at the very least. But the reason is, you're facing people like Habib ibn Mudahir. You're not fighting random people who don't have the resolve to stand in the way of injustice and oppression and defend the truth with every iota of their existence. You're facing a camp that has people like Zuhair ibn al-Qayn, who switched over from the enemy camp. He used to be a Uthmani, meaning that he blamed Amir al-Mu'mineen for the killing of Uthman. He hated Ali ibn Abi Talib. He was a Nasibi by our standards. And yet all it took was an audience with the master of the youth of paradise, Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. 5 minutes, the Imam called him. He even tried to avoid Imam al-Hussein as they were headed towards, they were both headed in the same direction. They were all going to Kufa. Every time Imam al-Hussein stopped for some water and stuff like that, for some rest, he would keep moving. And then when the Imam moved, he would then stop, just to make sure that they don't ever meet each other. And yet at some point, they did meet. They were in the same place at the same time. Imam al-Hussein sent after him. The messenger came, he said to him, the son of the daughter of Rasulullah is calling for you. So he just obviously wasn't impressed. Didn't really like Imam al-Hussein. And so he just kept quiet. His wife, who was there, she said to him, the son of the messenger of God is calling for you and you're just sitting here? Brothers and sisters, I've always said this. A wife, a mother, a daughter can be an incredible instrument for guiding those around her. Zurara ibn A'yan, who was one of the greatest companions of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, he had 11 brothers and only one sister. That one sister converted the entire family. And it's now because of Zurara and because of his brothers and because of their contributions that Imam al-Sadiq said, had it not been for them, the religion of my father Imam al-Baqir would have been non-existent today. And it's all thanks to this sister. So his wife says to him, go and answer your master. So he got up, he went. 2-3 minutes later, he comes back. He says to his wife, you can get your divorce. You can get everything I own. Take it and go back to my family. I am going to stay here and defend the son of Fatima. His wife said to him, you defend the son of Fatima, and I'm going to stay and defend and sympathize with the women of Fatima, with Zainab and Kulthum and Rubab and others. You want me to live while you go and get your place, secure your position at the highest pinnacles of paradise? I'm going to stay with you as well. And so you have someone like that defending Imam al-Hussein. You have someone like Abis. Allahu Akbar, wa ma adraka ma Abis. I don't know if you've heard the story. In some communities, the story of Abis isn't so pronounced. Many people haven't heard it. But Abis was the one who came to Imam al-Hussein. He said to him, Ya ibn Rasulullah, I wish I had more than my body and my soul to sacrifice for you. Wallah, if I had anything else, I would have given it in your way. But I don't. This is all I got. And so give me permission to go and fight. The Imam said to him, may Allah bless you. You have my blessing. You have my permission. So he charged at the army of tens of thousands of people all alone. He charged at them like a roaring lion, historians say, such that they all fled from him like a flock of sheep running away from a wolf. They all ran away. Every direction he went, they ran away into some other place. Eventually, some say, he noticed that they were going to divert their attention to Imam al-Hussein. They were going to attack the camp of Imam al-Hussein. So he said, why are you running away from me? Are you afraid of me? And so he took off his armor, he threw away his helmet. His only means of protection in a battle that's waged with sticks and stones and spears and arrows and swords, brothers and sisters. He said, are you afraid of me? Let me take off everything I got. So he took off the armor, he threw away the helmet, he even tore his shirt up and started charging towards them. Even then, they wouldn't attack him. They were too afraid of him. Someone called out, "Ajuninta ya Abis, have you gone completely mad, O Abis? What are you doing to yourself?" He said, "Na'am, inna hubb al-Hussein ajannani." The love of Hussein has made me go mad. Yes. That is the kind of madness that Allah likes, to be head over heels in love with the Ahlul Bayt, to go mad in love and infatuation with Hussein and his legend and his ideals. Inna hubb al-Husayni ajannani. Yeah, call me crazy if you must. Just come and fight me. Leave the son of Fatima and his children alone. So they left him, but they wouldn't attack him. They were still afraid of him. فَرَشَقُوا عَلَيْهِ الْحِجَارَ حَتَّى قَتَلُوهُ بِهَا. Even then they would only pelt him with their stones, and they killed him by stoning him to death. Imam al-Hussein had people like that. And that's why the battle took way longer than they had ever hoped or expected. This was the camp of Imam al-Hussein. So back to the two people who came to the Imam and said that we heard your father do this, and so we've defected. When the Imam asked them to join him, they then said, we don't want to get killed. So then listen to this. The Imam said to them, if you must, then leave and don't be witnesses to what's about to happen. فَوَاللَّهِ مَا سَمِعَ وَاعِيَتَنَا أَحَدٍ. By God, no one hears my cries for help and my pleading for assistance and fails to provide that help إِلَّا أَكَبَّهُ اللَّهُ عَلَى مِنْ خَرَيْهِ فِي نَارِ جَهَنَّمٍ. God will throw them onto the fires of hell on their face. In other words, Imam al-Hussein is so kind and compassionate. He says, don't do something for which you will deserve eternal damnation. If you don't want to help us, then at least leave so you don't hear me pleading for help and saying, أَلَا هَلْ مِن نَاصِرٍ يَنْصُرُنَا Sallallahu alayhi ya Aba Abdullah. Ya man ajibat min sabrihi malaikatu as-sama. It's no surprise then, brothers and sisters, that the angels in heaven were amazed at the patience of Hussein, at the kindness of Hussein, at the goodness of Hussein. The angels were left speechless, our traditions tell us. So, having said all of this, we've all heard those cries. We've all heard that the Imam said, أَلَا هَلْ مِن نَاصِرٍ يَنْصُرُنَا. Which means, now that we've heard it, even though Imam al-Hussein himself is no longer amongst us, but now that we've all heard it, there are a set of responsibilities attached to all of us. In case you're wondering, alhamdulillah, we've all boarded the ark of Abu Abdullah Hussein. We've all decided to link our destinies to his. We've all shown our love towards Abu Abdullah. But the question now comes, and it's how do we support him? How exactly, are there any practical steps that we can take to support Imam al-Hussein, with the exception or save the fact that we cannot rescue himself on the day of Ashura? We're not there. We've come over 1,000 years after. So how do we help him? To answer that question, brothers and sisters, I'll give you a few points inshallah and try not to take too much of your time. Number one, the most obvious way to help someone is to do so with your hand. It is to do so with your body. It is to do so physically. And Imam al-Hussein had plenty of people to do that for him on the day of Ashura. I mentioned some of these examples. I'll mention a couple more. There was a companion who joined Imam al-Hussein on the day of Ashura, who was so old, traditions say, that his back was arched, his eyebrows were covering his eyes. He had to wear a headband just to lift his eyes and eyebrows and eyelids so that he could see more clearly. I might have mentioned him before. This man came to Imam al-Hussein. By the way, one of his contributions to the cause of Imam al-Hussein is that there's a hadith narrated by both Sunni and Shia scholars. And the hadith is narrated and attributed to Rasulullah because he was a companion of Rasulullah. He says, سمعت رسول الله And where he said this is interesting as well. When he came to the Imam asking him permission to leave, the Imam said to him, what brought you here? What motivated you? He said, سمعت رسول الله أنه قال يقتل ولدي هذا بأرض يقال له كربلاء فمن شهد الموقف فلينصره. My son Hussein, this son of mine, will be killed in a land called Karbala. So whoever meets him on that land and makes it to that day should support him. That's it. That is all he needed to have the courage and the motivation to face an army of tens of thousands, brothers and sisters. Sometimes, I'll just say this parenthetically, sometimes we have this tendency, I've seen it in myself, I've seen it in others as well, this proclivity to, okay, what proves such and such is haram? Oh, here's a verse from the Quran. Are there any other verses? Why is only one verse there that talks about this? How about hadiths from the Prophet and the Imams? Here's a hadith from Imam al-Sadiq, but is there a hadith from the Prophet? How many pieces of evidence do you need, brothers and sisters, for things that you know to be true to be established without a reasonable doubt? Sometimes we're looking for excuses not to do the right thing, and so no matter how much evidence is presented to us, we're not content yet, we're not happy yet. What this man required was just one hadith. One hadith. And this hadith, as I said, is narrated by both Shi'i and Sunni scholars. He became the source of it. That's it. That's all you need. He acquired such insight, such foresight, such appreciation and cognition of the stature of Imam al-Hussein that drove him to the highest summits of grandeur. A couple of days before Ashura, he was sent by Imam al-Hussein as a messenger to Umar ibn Sa'd. He went to the tent of Umar ibn Sa'd, he stepped in, and he started talking. Umar said, hey, hang on. Why didn't you say Assalamu alaikum? Alastu bi Muslim? Am I not a Muslim? Aren't you supposed to say salam to a Muslim? He said, Wallahi ma anta bi Muslim, wa qad hamamta bi qatl al-Hussein ibn Ali. How could you be a Muslim when you're here with the intention of killing Imam al-Hussein, the son of Ali ibn Abi Talib? By God, you're not a Muslim. That courage, brothers and sisters, that bravery, that certainty, that belief that is unshakable and is stronger and firmer than the greatest mountain ranges on earth, that comes from submission to the truth. One hadith from the Prophet is all I need. Facts are established, done. This same man would go and he fights in the battlefield on the day of Ashura. آل علي شيعة الرحمن وآل حرب شيعة الشيطان. He sums up his entire belief system, his entire manifesto, his mission statement, if you like. He says the family of Ali ibn Abi Talib are the partisans of God. The family of Harb, meaning Abu Sufyan, are the partisans of who? The devil himself. That's one example of supporting Imam al-Hussein physically. The other example, there are so many. Unfortunately, there's only 10 nights. Unfortunately, the majalis are too short. Brothers and sisters, let me make another very important point. Many of us only show up to these majalis on the nights of Muharram, which is beautiful. It's great that you're here. It's great that you've all attended. I know how difficult it is, not just for you, but for the volunteers and the center and all the work that has to go into it, all the planning that has to go into it. You park far away from here, then you're shuttled here. I realize that and I appreciate that, and may Allah bless you for that. And I could never thank you for that, because the only remuneration and reward that you are entitled to is from Fatima Zahra herself, from mourning her son Hussein. But let's not make these nights the only nights where we learn and expand our knowledge. The only time where we actually get closer to Imam al-Hussein and the Ahlul Bayt through their stories and their legends. Let's try and show up more frequently, inshallah, throughout the year. Read up, and inshallah I'll talk a little bit about that later. One other example was a man whose name is actually difficult to track down. We've heard about his story. I'm sure many of you have heard his story, but his name is difficult to uncover in the history books. It took a while for me even to figure it out. He's a young boy of about 8 or 9 years. His name was Abdullah ibn Junadah. Memorize that name. He came, they say that on the day of Ashura, he approached Imam al-Hussein while dragging his sword on the sand. He couldn't even lift up the sword. He approached Imam al-Hussein. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Imagine Imam al-Hussein with his compassionate, kind and generous heart seeing these things. بِأَبِي الْمَقْتُولِ غَمَّةِ. Imam al-Hussein's heart was bleeding way before the day of Ashura, looking at all of these children, looking at all these people, knowing what's going to happen to them. The Imam saw this young boy. He said to those who were around him, he said, "Who is this boy? Take him back to his mother. What's he trying to do? He's trying to get himself killed." So he said to the Imam, "Ya ibn Rasulullah, if I go back to my mother, she'll be upset because she was the one who sent me." The Imam said his father was just killed in battle. He said, "My mother sent me, Ya Aba Abdullah. Look, she gave me this belt. She gave me this little chain. She gave me the sword. She sent me to you, Ya Aba Abdullah." Some say that Imam al-Hussein took him back to his mother. The Imam said, "Take your son." And so the mother said, "Ya Aba Abdullah, you wish for my son to remain alive? أَتُثْكَلُ أُمُّكَ الزَّهْرَاء بِوَلَدِهَا وَلَا أُثْكَلُ بِوَلَدِي. Your mother Fatima is grieving for her son. You don't want me to grieve for mine?" He was granted permission. He went to the battlefield and he recited a verse of poetry. And I ask all of you to try and memorize this, especially the younger members of the audience. Memorize this verse because you're going to need it. We all are going to need it on the first night they lower our bodies into our grave. Try and remember this verse so that you could recite it on that dreadful night. He went in there. "Who is this boy? Who is this kid? Who is his father?" So he introduced himself, not by using his name again, but by his character and his affiliation and his partisanship and who he belongs to, who his master is, not who he is. "Amiri Hussein wa ni'mal amir. سرور فؤاد البشير النذير علي وفاطمة والداه فهل تعلمون له من نظير." Don't worry about my name and who I am. That doesn't matter. Do you know what matters? My master is Hussein, and what a master he is. He is the son of Ali and Fatima. His grandfather is Rasulullah. فَقَاتَلَ حَتَّى قُتِلْ. He fought and eventually he was killed. Imam al-Hussein may not need your physical assistance right now, but he needs that kind of resolve. So that when the moment comes, when the push comes to the shove, when the going gets tough, when things get difficult, whether it be when his blessed grandson, Al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan al-Mahdi fidahu arwah al-alameen, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, when his grandson returns, he's going to need helpers, he's going to need supporters. But the way to get there is by training your soul step by step, incremental steps, so that you can get that kind of resolve. You start with the most basic things in your life. You start by refraining from sin, even the smallest, tiniest sins. You refrain from those, you train yourself, you get a bigger heart, and eventually you'll get the chance to prove your worth to Allah and to the Ahlul Bayt and to Imam al-Hussein. You'll get the chance one day. And it's not with physical training, it's not by going to the gym. It's by training your spirit. Nafsi innama urawwiduha, as Amir al-Mu'mineen tells us. أعينوني بورع واجتهاد وعفة وسداد. Help me, the Imam says. How? Ya Ali ibn Abi Talib, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. بورع واجتهاد. Wara' means God consciousness, guarding yourself against sin. Wajtihad, and hard work to toil in the worship of Allah and in the services to His creatures. وَعِفَّةٍ وَسَدَادٍ, and to try and be content with what you have. Don't ask for too much. Don't be greedy, and so forth. That's what the Ahlul Bayt want. That's how those people were able to get to themselves to those levels. So, That's one way to defend Imam al-Hussein physically, or to at least be prepared to do so. Number two is to defend and support Imam al-Hussein, brothers and sisters, through knowledge. And by knowledge, I mean the very first thing we're supposed to do as lovers and followers of the Ahlul Bayt is to know about them, is to know about their history, know about their teachings, learn about their words of wisdom, right? It's obvious. Look at what the scholars did. Look at, subhanallah, when you have people like Allama al-Amini spending 30 years in compiling his incredible magnum opus, the encyclopedia known as Al-Ghadir, in which he proves without a shadow of doubt the appointment of Amir al-Mu'mineen as the successor of the Prophet, using evidence from other people's sources, not ours, but theirs. 30 years, brothers and sisters, working on one book. Do you know how much work that requires, how much learning that requires? And that's not including all of the introductory courses he learned and taught so that he would get to that level. That's one example. The other example is Allama ibn al-Mutahhar al-Hilli. Let me tell you something. Ibn al-Mutahhar was a great scholar, but perhaps one of his greatest contributions was a book that he wrote. Let me give you some context, right? There was the Mughal Empire, or the Mongol Empire, which ruled after the Abbasids. They came to Baghdad, they took over the Muslim empire, they overthrew the Abbasids. They weren't Muslim, they were either Buddhists or atheists, but they suddenly became the kings of the biggest Muslim nation the world had ever seen. When these people came, who was their founder? Genghis Khan, very famous. So then after Genghis Khan, he had a successor. After him, he had a third successor, and so on and so forth. The seventh successor of Genghis Khan was a Mughal emperor by the name of Uljaltio. Uljaltio was baptized as a Christian when he was born. Obviously, he was born in a house of royalty, right? His forefathers were all kings, and kings of the greatest empire the world had seen. When his mother gave birth to him, because she was Christian, she baptized him and sealed the deal. He's a Christian. When he grew a little older, he was, he was a nationalist kind of figure. And so he said to himself, why am I a Christian? Our forefathers were all Buddhists, so he converted to Buddhism. After a while, he was introduced to Islam. Obviously, being the king of the Muslim empire, you get to meet certain people. And so he was impressed by some of the teachings of Islam, the Quran and whatnot. And so he became a Hanafi Muslim. Not a Shia, but a Hanafi Muslim. By that time, the capital of the Mughal Empire had shifted and moved from Baghdad to various parts of Iran or Persia. It went from different city to another one, but it was basically in Iran. Iran was also a Sunni nation. It wasn't Shia. Most of the people were adherents of various Sunni traditions and denominations. Uljaltio became a Hanafi Muslim until one day he noticed a very nasty confrontation and fight between Hanafi and Hanbali mullahs, and he was so disenfranchised, so upset at the level of the discourse and how disgusting it was, that he became sick and tired of this version of Islam. It was at that moment, brothers and sisters, that Al-Allama ibn al-Mutahhar al-Hilli, may Allah be pleased with him, seized the moment. So he came and paid him a visit. He said, look, you've been changing religions every now and then. How about I introduce you to our version of Islam? How about I introduce you to Muhammad and Al Muhammad salawatullahi alayhim ajma'in. Uljaltio said, fine, what have you got? So he became friends with him. He started sharing things, teaching him very slowly. You have to be careful. At the end of the day, he's a king. If he ever gets upset, if you ever say anything to displease him, then God knows how he's going to react. Allama al-Hilli slowly got him to accept the succession of Amir al-Mu'mineen and the Ahlul Bayt to the Holy Prophet. At the very end, you know how it is, right? Especially with converts, even after they've consumed all of this information and processed it all, it's still very difficult to switch religions. It's one of the hardest and toughest decisions a person can make, which is why converts are so blessed, which is why converts should be celebrated in our communities, brothers and sisters, because we grew up with these teachings, we take them for granted, whereas these people come from a completely different background. Anyway, Jaltiyo said to Allama al-Hilli, he said to him, okay, if you want me to embrace this version of Islam, then I wish for you to write a book that proves your points and proves that Ali ibn Abi Talib was in fact the successor of the Prophet, and I shall give you just 1 week to write the book. Give me all you got. Allama al-Hilli, being the person that he was, said challenge accepted. And he wrote a book called Nahjul Haqqi wa Kashfu Sidq. Look it up, it's available as a PDF online. The path of righteousness and the revelation of the truth. In the introduction of the book, he says, كَتَبْتُهُمْ تِثَالًا لِأَمْرِ السُّلْطَانِ, I wrote it because the king, the empire, asked me to, and he ordered me, so I wrote the book. And he praises him a lot as well at the introduction of the book. So he wrote the book in which, and I've skimmed through the book, it's an incredible title, brothers and sisters. It starts from belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a concise introduction to Islam, if you like, or to religion. Starts from belief in Allah all the way down to the day of resurrection and whatnot. But then the biggest chunk of the book is about all the verses that refer to the imamah of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And the rest of the book is about the evils, not just the merits of the Ahlul Bayt, but the evils of their enemies, which is incredibly important. Because if you just talk about the merits of the Ahlul Bayt, pretty much everyone subscribes to that. Everyone accepts it. There's no one in the world, not even non-Muslims, who will say we don't like the Ahlul Bayt once they get to know them. The problem is disassociating from their enemies. The problem is creating a clear boundary around what is truth and falsehood. So he wrote that book. Then he wrote another book, called it Al-Alfayn. And this book contains, get this, 2,000 pieces of proof and evidence that incontrovertibly prove the imamah of Ali ibn Abi Talib. 2,000. And he wrote the book. Some say his son then took that book and completed it, added another volume to it, and he gave it as a gift to Jaltiyo. Jaltiyo took the book, he went to all those other scholars that had been his cohorts, had been in his court the whole time. He said, here, take it. This is why I am now announcing that I am a Shia of Ali ibn Abi Talib, and that the institution, the religious institution in Iran, shall now be headed by a Shia scholar by the name of Allama al-Hilli, which ultimately led to the conversion of the entire country. As a matter of fact, I was reading up on him, and I noticed two really interesting facts. And we don't have much time. But the first is that his name was changed after he became a Muslim. He changed it to Khudabandeh, Sultan Muhammad Khudabandeh. That's how he's known in Iran and in history books. When he announced that he was now a Shia, all historians belonging to the other schools of thought were now so upset with him having changed his name that they began to call him Sultan Kharbandeh, the slave of the donkey, instead of Khudabandeh. Look at the hatred and how it's spewed. The second point that's also critical is that historians now speak about Jaltiyo or Sultan Muhammad Khudabandeh's reign as being one of the most prosperous in the history of Iran. At a time when he introduced so many projects and initiatives across the Persian Peninsula, and everyone prospered. That's a strategic, tactical move, brothers and sisters. That's strategic. You work on an individual who's in a position of prominence. You teach him, you share with him, you don't force him, you don't do anything. You simply expose him to the truth. And then as a result, now every Shia in the Persian Peninsula owes a debt of gratitude to Allama al-Hilli. With knowledge, brothers and sisters, you can achieve the impossible. By having the knowledge of the Ahlul Bayt, by reading the books that contain the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt. I've always said this, if you're looking for a place to start with the books of Shaykh al-Saduq. Look up the books of Shaykh al-Saduq online. They're all available in English as PDFs. Read them, start there. Number 3, so to support Imam al-Hussein physically. Number 2, to support him intellectually and with knowledge. Number 3, to support him with your tongue. Do you know how many times the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt have emphasized and reiterated the significance of speaking out in their defense, of using your tongue to write poetry, to recite eulogies for the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. لَكَ بِكُلِّ بَيْتٍ بَيْتٌ فِي الْجَنَّةِ. The Prophet said to that poet, he said, for every verse of poetry, Allah gives you a palace in paradise. How hard do we have to work to simply keep paying the mortgage for a small 2-bedroom house in this world? The Prophet says every verse, this is what Allah rewards you with. Hisham ibn al-Hakam, historians say that when he joined the group of companions who were the insiders, if you like, of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, Hisham ibn al-Hakam had not even grown a beard yet. And the companions say that there was no one among the companions of Imam al-Sadiq who was not older than Hisham. He was this little kid who joined the companionship of Imam al-Sadiq, the fellowship of Imam al-Sadiq, and yet every time he would walk in, the Imam would say, Ahlan binasirina ahl al-bayt. Greetings to the one who supports the household of Rasulullah. With what? With his tongue. And the Imam would have him sit right next to him. He would show him the kind of respect that would bring everyone to envy because he was so young and yet so close to the Imam. Harun, who was a tyrant, he used to tell his people, he'd say that the tongue of Hisham ibn al-Hakam, his tongue is more deadly and more dangerous for us than 1,000 swordsmen. And all he used was his tongue. All he used was his ability to speak and tell the truth. If you can write, then write in support of the Ahlul Bayt. If you can vlog, then vlog in support of the Ahlul Bayt. Instead of wasting our time on makeup videos and rubbish that's filled the internet nowadays, things that have nothing to do with morality or ethics or akhlaq, do not bring us closer to Allah, but not only that, definitely bring us farther away from Him. Instead of that, let's try and use these tools in good ways and try and serve the Ahlul Bayt. Whatever skill you have, and I have no doubt that every single one of you has at least one good thing that they're good at, one skill that you can excel in. Use it in the service of the Ahlul Bayt. By God, the Imams will reward you. This tongue was in fact so dreaded by the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt that we've all heard the story of Maytham and how his tongue was torn out. Another story that you probably haven't heard before is Ibn Sakit, who was two things. He was the most important and most distinguished linguist of his day. He was an expert in Arabic grammar, and he also was a Shia of the Ahlul Bayt. So Hisham ibn al-Hakam, who was a tyrant, he brought him and said, since you are the top expert on Arabic grammar, I want you to be my children's tutor. He had 2 kids. Even though he was a Shia, but he was willing to sort of disregard this aspect of him and use his expertise so that his kids would turn out to be, good orators or poets or whatever, which was, something that was held in high regard at the time. Nowadays, it's having your dentistry degree, your law degree, this, that, and the other. Back then, it was Arabic grammar. So he brought these 2 kids of his, brought Ibn Sakit, start teaching them. One day, Hisham walks in on one of those sessions. He sees Ibn Sakit seriously teaching the kids of Hisham. He said to him, let me ask you a question. Hisham asked him, he said, let me ask you a question. وَلَدَايَ هَذَانِ أَحَبُّ إِلَيْكَ أَمِ الْحَسَنُ وَالْحُسَيْنِ. Who do you hold more dearly, my two sons, these great princes who are going to turn out to be kings one day, or Hassan and Hussein, because he knew he was a Shia. Allam al-Majlisi says, listen to this, he says, Ibn Sikkid, who knew the rules of taqiyya and dissimulation, he knew that he could just as simply say, you know, I love your sons just as much as I love Imam Hassan and Hussein, not reveal his true beliefs. He could do that. But the question itself, it riled him up, it boiled his blood to such an extent that Allam al-Majlisi says he forgot about the rules of taqiyya and he simply revealed his true beliefs right then and there. He said, what? You're asking me whether I love your sons more than Hassan and Hussein? Wallah laqambar khadimu Ali ibn Abi Talib ahabbu ilayya minka wa min waladayk. Qambar, the slave of Ali, I love him more than you and your two sons together. Hisham said, really? So then he commanded, he had an army of Turkish mercenaries, al-Atrak. He brought them, he said, do what you must to him. فَاقْتَلَعُوا لِسَانَهُ مِنْ قَفَاهِ. They tore his tongue out from the back. I don't know how they would do that, but that's what they did. ثُمَّ دَاسُوا عَلَى ظَهْرِهِ وَبَطْنِهِ حَتَّى اسْتُشْهِدَ رَحِمَهُ اللَّهِ. Brothers and sisters, know the value of this tongue. Use it for good. Don't use it for evil. Know the value of the ability to be in these countries where you're free to speak about your beliefs and spread the message of the Ahlul Bayt. In many other countries, just today I was reading that in Malaysia, the religious police raided a private majlis for Imam al-Hussein. 24 security forces raided this house to arrest 25 people who had gathered. And the report even said that some of them were children. They were all arrested, taken to prison. Why? Because they are preaching what the religious police said, deviant beliefs. Grotesque practices, they called them. Grotesque meaning crying for the son of Rasulullah. Deviant meaning condemning Yazid, the drunkard. There are many countries and societies around the world where you don't have these freedoms. Here you do. Use the skills that you have, or Allah, na'udhu billah, might take them away from you. We seek refuge in Allah. Now, use your tongue. The Imams of the Ahlul Bayt would reward people like Al-Farazdaq. They would reward people who would come to their support, come to their rescue. And finally, and I will wrap up, there's so much more to talk about, especially on this topic, but we don't have time. My apologies. Finally, brothers and sisters, support the Imam with your wealth, which is a lot harder said than done, because when you give money, you feel like you're giving away all the potential things that you could have done with that money. When you give money in the way of Allah and the Ahlul Bayt, you feel like you're tearing a piece of you, a limb off, and then giving it to others. That's why it's hard. مَبْتَلَ اللَّهُ الْعِبَادَ بِشَيْءٍ أَشَدَّ مِنَ الْإِنفَاقِ, the hadith says. Yes, it's hard. Which is why it's easy to make up excuses. Which is why it's easy to just delegate to other people. Which is why it's so convenient for people to say, this mosque doesn't need it, this center doesn't need it, this initiative. I'm sure there are other people who help. I remember once I approached someone, a very good person by the way, and I said to him, we need $50,000 for a project. He said, look, I will contribute. I'll be one of the people who contributes. All you need is 50 people to give 1,000. I'll be one of those, but I'll be at the very bottom of the list. In other words, go get 49 other people, I'll be number 50. I said, but how is that any special? You're supposed to be the first one. You're supposed to be the one to lead the way and show others that it's not too difficult to contribute. And so when it comes to contributing to the cause of the Ahlul Bayt, you've been to Arba'een, or you've at least seen pictures and videos of Ziyarat al-Arba'een. Have you noticed, brothers and sisters, the creativity of the numerous ways that people have to show their love for Imam al-Hussein? Have you noticed how there are people who give out tissue papers, especially children? I've seen people who, in Ziyarat al-Arba'een, who give away toothpicks. That's all they could get. That's all they could afford. They don't have the money to build a mosque. They don't have the financial prowess to, contribute in large volumes to the feeding of the pilgrims. But I can give a toothpick, I'll give a toothpick. I can feed one person, I'll feed one person. لا تستحي من إعطاء القليل, Amir al-Mu'mineen says. فإن الحرمان أقل. Never be ashamed of giving whatever you can, but make sure it's what you can. If you're able to contribute a large sum of money, as I said the other night, Imam al-Hussein doesn't need us. Imam al-Hussein's flame takes his fuel from the tears of the angels in heaven. It's you and I who need Imam al-Hussein. It's you and I who need to prove our loyalty and love for him by doing these things, by making these sacrifices. I'm ashamed, honestly, when I hear that the organizers, the beautiful volunteers at this center and this mosque, come to me every day and say, Sayyid, we're not getting the donations that we need, not even to cover the food that we give out to 1,500 people a night or 2,000 people every night. Why? We live in a country where we can afford it. We live in a country where we can actually contribute without it even making as much as a dent in our account. Why is it that we always wait for the other person to come and help? You have the volunteers here, go up to them. Tell them, here's my contribution. And by the way, let me say something else. You might say, well, there are things that happen in this mosque that I'm not comfortable with. But show me a mosque where you're 100% happy with everything that they do. Of course, there are going to be things that you don't agree with, perhaps, things that you're not comfortable with, things that you don't want to do yourself. Fine, so what? Contribute to the institution. Contribute to the feeding of these lovers of Imam al-Hussein, some of whom come from 2-3 hours away, I was told the other night. They come all the way from northern Maryland, they come from different states to attend the majlis of Hussein. It is Hussein that brings them here. It is what the hadith refers to as إِنَّ لِقَتْلِ الْحُسَيْنِ حَرَارَةً فِي قُلُوبِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ لَا تَبْرُدُ أَبَدًا. It is that love that brings them all the way here. Help them. Help create a parking space for their cars. Help facilitate the majalis of Imam al-Hussein. And let me just mention this. A man went to see Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam. He took with him a lot of money. Khums, zakat, huquq from Qom, or rather from Nayshabur, from the northeast of Iran. So when he went to the Imam, he offered to give all that to the Imam. The Imam said to him, I'm not interested in all of this money. Why, Ibn Rasulullah? He said, because this money isn't too clean. It's mixed up with haram. And we, the Ahlul Bayt, don't take money that's mixed with haram. Instead, give me what Shatita gave you. Shatita was this old woman who lived in Nayshabur. Her shrine is now visited by those who pass through the city of Nayshabur in Iran. She's called Bibi Shatita. Shatita was an elderly woman whose contribution in khums and zakat and huquq was a few threads, not even, because back then the currency was gold, silver, and fabric. She didn't have like a big enough fabric. She had just a few threads and 7 broken silver coins, just 7. And the man had brought tens of thousands worth of gold, silver, and bars. The Imam said, I'm not interested in any of those. Give me what Shatita gave you. That is what I'm going to accept. It's the money that you pay that, number 1, is pure, and number 2, sincere. You give it in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Imam took that money, then he took out 30 gold coins and he gave it to him. He said, go give this to Shatita. Also give her this kafan. Allahu Akbar. As I said, brothers and sisters, the Imams reward those who serve them. Whether it be by their physical hands, by their strength, by their skills, by their tongue, by their money, the Imams will reward you. And they will show you the reward. You will taste it. The Imam said, give her this shroud. Tell her to pack her bags. Tell her to get ready, because in 3 weeks' time, she'll pass from this world. And tell her that this shroud was sewn by my own mother. And it's taken from the cotton in Lebanon. And he gave it to her. He gave it to him. He then went and handed it over to Bibi Shatita. She readied herself, and when she died, the Imam himself came and lowered her into her grave. And he sprinkled, the hadith says, on her body, parts of the dust of Karbala. He sprinkled her on her. I do apologize. Supporting Imam al-Hussein is a big responsibility. One thing you can do is to ask the Imam himself, inspire me, show me the way, give me something I can use to support you. Inshallah. Tonight is a night of grief. Some say that Imam al-Hussein, while everyone was resting, the Imam went out and he was taking a bit of a hike around the tents and the camp. So one of the companions of the Imam went to him. He was there to be his bodyguard, if you like, to support, to ensure that no harm comes to him. And some say that the reason Imam al-Hussein was out there in the middle of the night, because remember, the one who was guarding the tents was Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. But the reason Imam al-Hussein went was so that he would pick up the thorny leaves from the ground, because he knew that tomorrow his young orphans would be running around on these plains. And to ensure that the thorns wouldn't go in the feet of Ruqayya and Sakina, Imam al-Hussein was picking them up as he moved along. Then the Imam told his companion, he said to him, you see those two mountains, there's a valley in the middle. Tonight is a dark night. Why don't you just escape, save yourself, go. They say that he fell to the ground and started kissing the feet of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, saying, Ya Aba Abdullah, أكلتني الذئاب حيا إن أنا تركتك. I'd rather be eaten by wolves than abandon you here. Please don't let me go. Don't command me to go. Don't force me to leave. Allahu Akbar. These companions were defending Imam al-Hussein with every iota of every atom of their existence. On the eve of Ashura, Imam al-Hussein was safe. Lady Zainab felt safe. Rubab felt safe. And yet on the day of Ashura, it was a different scene. Allahu Akbar. On the 7th day of Muharram, they prevented the camp of Imam al-Hussein from access to the water. 3 days, no water. There was still some water containers that they had. So they had to prioritize. Imam al-Hussein didn't drink a drop from the 7th of Muharram. Al-Abbas didn't drink anything. They had to prioritize. For who? For the children, of course. And yet, on the 9th of Muharram, all the water dried out. There was nothing left. Sukaina says, I came to tell my aunt Zainab that I'm thirsty. As soon as I walked in, I noticed that Zainab was holding a baby, a child, an infant, and it was my brother Ali al-Asghar. When Zainab saw me, when my aunt saw me, she said, Sukaina, can you go tell your father to do something for this child? Sukaina says that I was ashamed of telling my aunt about my own thirst when I saw my brother in a state that some have described like this. You know, when a child gets thirsty and hungry, the child will be uneasy. The child will cry for a while. The child will scream even. But then when the thirst takes its toll on the baby, the child is so weak that it cannot even move anymore. It looks like a fish that you've taken out of the water. At first it jumps up and down, but then the fish doesn't even move as much. It might move its tail, but all you see is that the lips of the fish will open and close as though to beg for water. A child doesn't have a tongue to speak. An infant who is 6 months old cannot express the thirst, but it simply moves the lips, those parched, dry lips, as though to say, just like all the other children of Aba Abdullah, echo their words, Al-Atash, Al-Atash, Al-Atash. I swear to God, brothers and sisters, when I go to Karbala and sit inside the shrine of Imam al-Hussein, it's almost as though I can hear echoes of those cries, Al-Atash, Al-Atash, Al-Atash. But at least the children could say as much. This infant couldn't even say the words. But there is a third stage. The second stage, as I said, the child has no more energy to move or even cry. But the third stage is different. If you take that fish in the second stage and throw it back into the water, it will survive. But when the third stage sets in, even if you put it back in the water, it will die. Even if they quenched its thirst, it would not survive. Which is why on the day of Ashura, Imam al Hussain came. He called out, Ukhayya Zainab. Allahu Akbar. Brothers and sisters, if you haven't cried in these 10 nights, tonight is the cry. With Rubab, the mother of Ali. Rubab has only tonight to spend with her infant son. It's only on this night that she gets to spend time with him. She knows that tomorrow will bring dreadful news. On the day of Ashura, the Imam called for his sister, Ukhayya Zainab, Nawlini waladi Allah. Some people have asked, look at this baby right now. You see how calm it is? A child has no clue what's going on around him. He has no idea there is a war that's raging. Sleeping calmly. But do you see how soft that neck looks right now? Aba Abdullah said, Nawlini waladi al-Rabi' hatta uwaddi'a. Bring me my son, I wish to say goodbyes. Some have said, why did Aba Abdullah call for Zainab? The baby's mother was right there. Rubab was in the camp. And so they have said that maybe one of the reasons is Imam al-Hussein can't bear to look in the eyes of Rubab and not have water for her child. Others have said that because Rubab couldn't bear to look at her own infant child, she simply handed the baby over to Zainab and Kulthum and Sakina and said, I can't look at my baby. So she brought him to Aba Abdullah. The Imam took the child. Lady Zainab said, Ya Aba Abdullah, maybe you could ask them for a drink. Maybe they would have some emotions. Maybe they have a heart. Aba Abdullah took the infant Abdullah. He headed towards the enemy camp. Ajarakum Allah ya mu'mineen. They say that all of the companions of Imam al-Hussein, they all marched towards the camp. They all walked towards their death, except this youngest soldier of Allah, who had to be carried both ways on his father's hand. He went towards the enemy. He said to him, Ya qawm, laqad qataltum ahli wa dhulli wa ashabi. You have killed my children, you have killed my companions. وَلَمْ يَبْقَ لِي إِلَّا هَذَا الرَّضِيعُ. The only one remaining in my camp is this infant child. خُذُوهُ وَاسْقُوهُ شَرْبَةً مِنَ الْمَاءِ. Take him and quench his thirst. In other words, if you're afraid I will drink the water myself, maybe you can quench his thirst. Feed him something. He's going to die anyway. At least make sure he doesn't die thirsty. Aywa Aba Abdullah wa Hussaina wa Mawlullah. As he stood there, the camp was split in two. One was saying, kill all of them. The other group said, إن كان للرجال ذنب فما ذنب هذا الرضيع. If the adults were criminals who deserved to be killed, what crime did the 6-month-old infant commit? As Aba Abdullah stood there, the strife among the enemy increased. So Umar ibn Sa'd called out, Ya Harmala. You know, the name of Harmala shakes the heart of every mother, every Shia, all the women of Rasulullah. Ya Harmala, iqta' niza' al-qawm. Put an end to this discussion. He knew what he had to do. He was unsure as to who to shoot. He said, أَأَقْتُلُ الْوَالِدَ أَمِ الْوَلَدِ? Do I kill the father or the boy? Ya mu'mineen. He then told him, do you not see the shiny neck of the boy? He took out an arrow, sahmun muthallathun masmoon. There were arrows they used to kill normal people, but there were arrows that were used to hunt wild beasts, to kill animals. He took out one of those. It was a 3-pronged arrow. How big is the neck of a 6-month-old infant? Does it even need a 3-pronged arrow? There was three of these arrows in Karbala. One was used to shoot into the chest of Abu Fadl al-Abbas. The other was used against Abu Abdullah. And the third was used on the infant Abdullah al-Rabi'. He shot him with the arrow. Suddenly Abu Abdullah noticed the child flapping and moving. He looked at him for the Muharram and what he cut his head off from the jugular vein to the jugular vein. رحم الله من نادى وحسينا وغريبا ومظلوما وعلي أصغرا. أيوا ويلاه يا صاحب الأمر يا إمام الزمان أجرك الله. Aba Abdullah saw many people killed on Ashura, but the only time Allah gave him condolences was when he had his